Hello, Radiant One, and a very big and a very warm welcome to Mastery, the show and podcast for brilliant spiritual beings just like you, having a human experience ready to ignite the mastery inherent in you, as well as grow and expand from within and wanting to lead with love in work, business, and life. Designed to activate the mastery already within you, here we merge the worlds of seen and unseen, magic and miracles with the mundane and the practical, spirituality with strategy, the energetic with the physical, and business, work, and life with a whole lot of love and soul. I'm your host, spiritual business coach, business developer, and radical love rebel Maria Serafina. And it is my deep honor, my great pleasure, and joy to share this episode with you. I serve business owners and leaders wanting to learn and be supported as you navigate leading with heart and soul. I do that through the Spiritual Leadership Academy, the Spiritual MBA, and one-on-one spiritual business coaching full of intuition and energetic alignment. You can find out more about everything on my website, mariaserafina.com. Having been called to this show and podcast, it is my strong guess that mastery is already inherent within you, Radiant One. If you'd like to expand and amplify that mastery, download the Mastery Activation I've created for you. Originally released within my paid membership, The Elevation, I've now made it available to all. Go to mariaserafina.com/MA or click the link in the description to receive it. Remember, if you enjoy Mastery, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, share, or leave a review to amplify the energy and love being shared in these transmissions so they can reach more and more gorgeous radiant beings like you. Today I'm joined by Simran Ngole, a highly respected sound healer and intuitive soul guide renowned for their exceptional skills and transformative work. With a profound understanding of the healing power of sound, Simran has captivated audiences with their ethereal melodies and captivating vocal abilities. Their unique compositions and performances create a harmonious tapestry of healing vibrations, enabling individuals to experience deep states of relaxation, inner peace, and spiritual awakening. As an intuitive soul guide, Simran possesses a natural ability to access the wisdom of the soul realm, guiding individuals towards clarity, purpose, and personal growth. Their deep connection to the Akashic records, an energetic repository of knowledge, allows them to provide profound insights and transformative guidance to those seeking a deeper understanding of themselves and their life's path. I've been blessed to move in Simran circles for years, and we've had multiple sacred conversations. I consider them to be an oracle because they speak their truth, whether that truth will be well received or not, in service to the highest for all, so that we might have an opportunity for healing even further. On my website, you'll find links to the other sacred conversations we've had, equally powerful in nature as these transmissions are literally timeless. Enjoy, Radiant One. Here is our sacred conversation. Simran, welcome, and thank you for having been willing once again to join me in sacred conversation in any of my endeavors. It's funny, I was all giddy and excited, and I still am, but now that we've started recording, I just feel this calm come over me. It's like, oh, this is gonna be deep. Would you start out by introducing yourself and let the world know of your brilliance and your, just magnificence?
Thank you so much. First of all, Maria Serafina, I'm glad to be back, and especially in this iteration of your podcast. And yeah, it's always good when we get together. And yeah, so I'm Simran Gole. I'm the founder of the Luminary Soul. And I'm a sound healer. I am a just sacred conduit and facilitator of embodiment, growth, and expansion. Some would call that spiritual coaching and all these other names, but that's more or less a lot of what I do. And yeah, I love to help creatives luminaries, visionaries step into their divine purpose
Yeah.
and really learn what their gifts are, harness their gifts, and expand their gifts to really live at their fullest potential and to help others to do the same. So,
Yes. And you're such a luminary soul yourself. You're such a, I mean, I call you an oracle because you are the way that I view you, you access a different stream of consciousness and you translate it into the world in a way that is, well, at least to me, revelatory, illuminating, earth shaking, truthful, just powerful, powerful. And you do that by, as far as I observe, simply being you, which I absolutely love. So yeah, so I just wanted to add that you're just yeah so multifaceted as you know we are. Um, this conversation is inspired by I reached out to you because I was like, So having been on my own spiritual journey, my own spiritual path for I suppose a long time, but consciously sort of ish 20-ish years. One of the things I've noticed over the years is how um, less attached or more detached I become from polarity and the binary world, and more connect with, or it like I become less and less quote unquote concerned with polarities and see more of oneness and connection. And so you, as someone who has made, I don't know if it's true to call it made the journey, or it's more of like have returned home from considering yourself a binary person to now a non-binary person. I thought, and then with your brilliance, I thought for you to come in and share that journey, I would just love to have you share that. So that was the inspiration. And I am again, I'm so grateful that you said yes to this. Yeah, yeah. So so can you maybe start us off by like sharing your origin point in terms of your spiritual journey, and then sort of like we'll go into what happened and where you're at now with everything. I know that was a massive question, but like we've got time, so please.
yeah, that's a very massive question because my spiritual journey has had a lot,
Yes.
just with it. Like, and it's not to say that it's not like a competition of like who's had
Oh,
the like bigger, but it's a lot. Like, it was
yeah,
a very, I really had to sit back recently and review a lot of what has gone on in my spiritual journey because
yeah.
it's definitely things that someone who's like twice, three times my age and my 33 years of life have even undergone. But to answer your question, it's like many people, I started out my upbringing was very religious. I grew up for all intents and purposes, Southern Baptist or just different spans of evangelical Christianity.
Ooh,
But for the most part, Southern Black Baptist was my upbringing growing up in the American South in Virginia. And most of my family are ministers to
oh,
some degree. My
yeah,
grandmother's a reverend. My great uncle, her brother is a reverend. My uncle, who's my mother's brother, is also like a pastor. So I
yeah,
have a lot of like pastors, preachers, prophetesses in
yeah.
like evangelical Christianity. So that was my upbringing and was in church for a while. And once I hit my preteens, about
Mhm.
12, 13, my mother, who I would say is the more liberal out of my family, um, decided to decided to prioritize diversity within our religious background. And so we started going to more non-denominational, like integrated churches that, also have like, white people, Hispanic people.
Yeah.
Um, and also had a much more of a grounded youth program because at
Mm,
that point I would go to church, but like I hated going to church every Sunday. It's like
mm,
it's the weekend. Why do I have to spend all day in church? Because in the Southern Baptist tradition, you were in church from like 10 a.m. to like 2 in the afternoon. That was normal. Yeah, like 1 o'clock. Like one o'clock, 1:30 was when you got out of church. So for me, I'm like, this is too long. I just want to play Pokemon on my Game Boy
yeah.
and all this like shouting and speaking in tongues and people falling out and running laps around the pulpit and falling on the floor and they put the sheet over them and they're convulsing. I'm like, I don't understand. Like this
Mm,
is just it's too much for my at the time I didn't know what nervous systems were, but that's ultimately what it was. It's too much.
yeah. Too
So
much.
we were going to this church and ultimately I had my youth pastor at the time. That was when I met my youth pastor at the time. His name was Pastor Mike. And I decided that I wanted to give my life to Jesus and ultimately get saved because he preached the gospel in a way that was fun and was
Mm,
entertaining and could relate to my preteen teen mind. So that was at that church that I had gone to and ultimately became more active spiritually. And that's when a lot of my spiritual gifts started to come online and more of my passion for spirituality
yeah.
started to come online. And that was more in that frame of reference of this is the statistics say that only 4% of my generation will know Christ. So that's why we have to really like
Oh,
mobilize, get into our schools, and that was also post Columbine, the
oh,
post Columbine shooting. So a lot of the lore around being martyred for Jesus because there was the student who was rumored to have been shot because of her faith, but that has long since been debunked.
mm,
But at that time, that was a big um I guess like ta not I guess like fear tactic in a way, or even just
yeah.
a point to try to
Yeah.
influence millennial teens at that time,
Yeah.
millennial
When
evangelicals at
you
that
when
time.
you say spiritual gifts came online, what did you experience?
Just more of connecting with God, what I know now to be my claircognizance, that
Mm,
spiritual
yeah.
knowing, what I know now, or even what also that particular style of Christianity will call the gift of discernment or even the gift of prophecy. Because
Mm, yes. Okay.
my
Yeah.
church, yeah, my church taught gifts of the spirit, which I
Gotcha.
later realized it's the same thing as different psychic
Yes.
gifts, just
Yeah.
repackaged. And so I was told that I had gift of discernment um
Yeah.
and I was also a praise dancer, which is a form of like interpretive like flow dance, but it's
Oh,
done
yeah.
praise
That
and
makes sense.
worship.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I would in praise and worship I had this I guess now for people who know about like EDM festivals, it's like poi flags essentially, but they're just poi flags used in church. And so I was using that like worshiping God and moving
Yeah.
and I guess because I would shine a lot of light, people in my church didn't like that. Or I would sing. I was invited to sing in the praise and worship group.
Mm,
And but because of, I guess, whatever light that I shone and the
yeah.
passion, I was then told that I had a spirit of performance and then was kicked off for,
Oh,
and so, and then my pastor, our senior pastor, his wife, I remember she was praying over me for something around that time and she touched my hands. And when I was younger, I would wear these hoodies and I would pull my sleeves up to my
yeah.
knuckle around
Yeah.
where my finger. She's like, "Why do you cover your hands?" I said, "I don't know. I just it's comfortable." She said, pull your hands out of your sleeves. There's something in your hands. You have a gift in your hands. There's something in your hands."
Yeah.
And that stuck with me until later. But around that point in my spiritual journey, that was when I was really starting to learn that I had gifts. God has given me gifts, and I'm supposed to use my gifts for God, but my church is not letting me. And they're telling me
Yeah.
that I'm bad and I'm not even doing anything.
Be-
So
because of, and the reason why I made a face when you said don't cover your hands is because if if we have the gift of healing or the gift of energy, like our hands, as you know, are very, very powerful energy points. And so for her to want to touch them, like not that I'm not saying that that's what she was doing, but I was sort of slightly worried that you were going to say that that's what she wanted to do, because that would have been like it could have been like not an assault, but it's like but it could have been experienced as such if you're like if you're so sensitive that you're not wanting to have other people. It seems like, yeah. Am I making sense? Does that make
it
sense?
making sense. And actually, in that experience, it kind of felt that way because it was a little intrusive.
Yes, exactly.
Um,
Intrusive is what I
and
not
and
assault.
then and after that experience, she did have a role in the further suppression of my
Yeah,
gifts.
yeah, that makes sense. Because
And
that's the thing with I don't want to say you, but people who carry the light. I've had this myself as well. Is like we are like we are enthusiastic, we're passionate, we're driven, we're bubbling over with this joy and just wanting to share. And that light highlights in others what they do not carry or do not see in themselves yet. And so if they're not able to hold space for that, what they will do, both consciously and unconsciously, will be like, oh, you're the one that has to shut down. I'm not the one that has to be lit up. Like, does that make sense?
that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or things that they
Yeah.
want to embody within themselves, but they're too afraid to.
Yes, or they don't
Mhm.
know how.
Don't
Like,
know how. Yeah.
and also if you know if it's in a conventional or somewhat conventional religious setting, there are certain dogma and doctrine like of how that's supposed to happen, and yeah, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Because like again, because I see again, we're connected on Facebook. I mean, I double tap and I love everything that you share because I see I can totally see how what you share can be like I said, earth shattering for some people. If you're not there, I can totally see that. However, for those of us who are, it's also mind blowing, eye opening, like I said, oracle like that's yeah. Okay, so that was your teenage year. Like, so what happened then? Like, so you mentioned that was a further suppression, and you were, I don't know, kicked out, or what happened, and then how did you start to come back into where you're now? Or
Yeah, and it's really wild this next iteration that I'm going to share with you about because a lot of the suppression that has happened to me, these people are on like Hulu and have documentaries about them. Like,
oh,
yeah, like these are people that I have like direct court. So it's just that's why I say like it's a lot.
okay,
So more of the suppression was happening. I'll keep just condense it because and me and that pastor who said there was something in my hand, she was doing a lot to suppress and my mom wasn't standing up for me really. And it's something that she and I are just now starting to work through a lot because my mom is a is dealing with like chronic people pleasing. And so it was just more or less like that's your drama. And
yeah.
yeah, so ultimately I decided to leave that church for another church that at the time was directly related to Hillsong Church based out of Sydney, Australia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the pastor of that church um came from there to start a church in my local area. And that's when I met Pastor Carl Lentz before he became the famous Carl Lentz that you see in the documentaries about Hillsong now.
Infamous, I suppose.
Yeah, this was before became the famous Carl Lentz,
Yeah.
but he actually had a lot of influence even before then with
Yeah.
a lot of celebrities, and he knew a guy that worked for our local radio station. And
Yeah.
that point, that was when things were even bigger because the church that I went before then was a relatively bigger church, but this one is like a
Yes.
relatively big church in my area, and so I was connected to lots and lots of people.
Yeah.
Um, But then I was really this was the tail end of high school, like going into college. This was between late high school and early college for me that I was here. And so this was when I know that I have gifts. I know that I'm here for a purpose.
Mm,
And I know that I have a connection to Jesus, but I don't think that I believe that Jesus is the only way, like the way that they're saying, and this was a really modern church, really hip. And so at that point, also all that was cool and dandy and in connection. But again, I was in choir.
mm,
And there, it's a bigger choir, it's a bigger praise and worship group. They have it where you can write songs and submit your songs.
mm,
And I knew that my songs were good, my
mm.
songs were worthy, but it was like, no,
Yeah.
you're not popular enough, which I later realized that it was my socioeconomic background. And I have a lot of melanin in my skin. And so, yeah, there's a lot of melanated people at that church, but they really had a lot of unconscious and maybe even some conscious biases going there. But it was just
Okay.
like, I know that I'm supposed to be in the spotlight, but that code of spiritual performance that was spoken over me at the old church was really holding me back of like,
Yeah.
okay, so I know that I'm meant to be front facing in my work in a
Yeah.
spotlight, and
Yeah.
I'm not desiring that specifically for my ego. Like
Mm,
I have a message to share, but
mm. Yeah.
there was a guilt there of like you shouldn't want that. Like, and clearly God isn't giving it to you.
And you know what? That actually, sorry for jumping, like that
Okay.
again speaks to the whole binary thing is like you can't be both and, right? You can't both be performative or like want to not want to be on stage and at the same time be humble, which is BS because of course you can. You can both be like in your full glory, sharing whatever, singing your heart out, and at the same time be humble about your gift. Yeah, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then, I just saw more and more of the hypocrisy, which is funny because a lot of what they talked about as far as the social culture within the church and the documentaries was
Yeah.
exactly how it was at the church that I was. And then
Mm.
and then there was this crossroads because Carl was pursued by Pastor Brian Houston to start Hillsong New York City, which is where that whole story of when he got famous started, and
Yeah.
where my spiritual journey with Christianity started to wind down.
Yeah. Disintegrate. Yeah.
So because he left a lot of his pull, the church things with the church kind of declined. And then just the climate got weird, and I was one of the first people who subsequently no longer go there anymore and have
Yeah.
woken up
Yeah.
and however to leave. And that's when I met my mentors, Gray Medicine Wolf and Darlene Steyer, who are both indigenous. And
Mm.
that's when the beginning of the journey that I'm on now began, and they really helped to
Yeah.
reignite gifts.
Can I pop in a question? Because you're touching upon, the celebrity and, quote unquote Christianity whole thing with celebrities. And I've heard this spoken about, also here in Denmark, where I'm at a few times that like there's more and more sort of quote unquote famous people or celebrities who are wanting that. And we're a Protestant country.
Yeah,
But I find it so interesting because to me, like, it seems as though that might be because that's the only thing, like, that's the only quote unquote spiritual structure that they know
yeah,
that it's not like because I mean in Denmark Christianity or Protestantism is like it's a born in. I think it's one of the only, if not the only, European Western country where it's a state religion. We have a state religion where when you're born here, whether you're Hindu or Muslim or Buddhist or anything other than Christian, you're born into. You have to sign yourself out of the church. Like you pay a membership, like you pay a certain amount of tax every year. It's a very slight percentage, but you have to sign yourself out even if you belong to a different denomination than Christian, which I find to be like, and also as spiritual and connected to Jesus as I am, I don't want want it to be connect. I want state religion to be connect. I mean, we see what's going on in the US and I'm like, what the fuck? So my
Yeah.
question to you is, in terms of celebrities, um, what's your take on the whole, like, is it simply that they're seeking source? Is it simply that they're seeking something that is greater than themselves, or, and why are they attracted to these, cake toppers? Like, it's like, yeah. Does that make sense? Did I ask, like, did my question make
Like, are
sense
you
in terms of,
asking like why do celebrities get caught up in
not
like
necessarily caught up, but like, why are they so attracted to like Christianity? Like, or is it really could it be any other religion? Like, why not?
I think it's many other religions, and I think it's also a multi-layered question
Yeah,
because now, especially in because I stay connected to a lot of ex-Fundy content creators who talk about this, and um I think in some ways because fame is a trauma. And when you go through trauma, a lot of times you are stuck at that age when the trauma happened in some
yes,
way.
yeah,
When you
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah,
about because when you think about people like Justin Bieber, who became
yes,
young, like famous really young, or
yeah,
even some celebrities that go through like a big canceling event,
yeah,
uh, a lot of times that will activate, okay, but why am I here? Like a why am I here type of thing. Because that's, when you think about the stages of the stages of transformation energetically, when you
yeah,
get into wanting to embody who you really are at a soul level, it
yeah,
starts with the why am I here, the initial desire of wanting to change and wanting to do something
mm,
different. That's the first part. And
mm,
especially if you're in a Protestant country,
mm.
especially here in the US, Christianity is front and center, and
Right,
so
right. Yeah, I
when you
suppose you're right.
or if they have a prior negative experience with Christianity, like I did when I wanted something different, they'll sometimes look to Eastern philosophy or
Yeah,
like Hinduism
yeah,
or Buddhism
yeah,
or like that, just that start
yeah.
of it. Or sometimes even I did really bad things, and so I want to convince people that I changed. So I'm gonna go to
Mm.
Christianity and do the whole I
The
found
shield. Yeah,
like
yeah,
Jesus thing.
yeah,
Too. So that's why I say it all
yeah,
depends on what the impetus for the
yeah.
change and drive
The person
behind.
itself. That makes
Mhm.
sense. Okay, so going back to what you shared, you said that you then encountered your indigenous mentors. Can you name them again, please? Because I want to make sure that we honor them.
Yes, shout out to Gray Medicine Wolf and Darlene Steyer, who is also Stone Woman, or she who speaks with stones. So those are my like original teachers. Love y'all.
And when tell us from that inception point. I don't know if it's an inception point. That's what's coming up for me. But tell us what happened then.
Yeah, so they were really great at starting communities. So they had this community, um and that's really what locked me in and introduced me to a lot of people who I'm still very connected to and close to this day. Throw just hosting new moon ceremonies,
Mm,
teaching how to walk the red road as they call it, and
mm,
uh they taught me how to smudge. They taught me how to work with herbs, and Grey Wolf was really big into crystals and still is, and just that's how I learned about crystals, how I learned about everything. And it's a
mm,
time in my life that I've learned to be extremely grateful for now, because this is before TikTok and social
mm.
media. Those people taught
Yeah,
spirituality, to be able to actually learn it from the people that it came from and have that
yeah.
be my introduction. It was just so sacred, and learning Ho'oponopono from someone of the culture,
Mm,
and just just learning my energy, learning
mm,
how to my energy, learning what energy even was, learning that I can actually take control of my own life. And if I learn to work with myself learn who I am at soul level, that can change my life because of that. Because prior to that, I pretty much felt like life was happening to me and that I just was helpless. It was almost like a learned helplessness, and I was still in victim mentality. Like my
Yeah.
nervous system
Yeah.
was still in that, like,
Yeah.
why is this happening? But I just knew that what was going on, all this hypocrisy, all these people trying to suppress me, like, no
Yeah.
more. I'm gonna leave. It's time for me to go,
Yeah.
and we'll just figure it out. And I
Yeah.
literally walked away from all the friends that I knew,
Yeah.
and that was pretty much then. And then there was a little bit of a segue in my time working with Gray Medicine Wolf where I got wrapped up in two different cults that I then left. And so, and then got reconnected with them.
Yeah.
And um, but then from then on, I just continued to grow and learn. And then the breadcrumbs came to learn the modalities that started the early aspects of my spiritual work that led to where I am now.
Yeah.
So
And when you mentioned the cults, one of the things that I've realized in recent years is that I actually seem to have dodged also some bullets in terms of cults, or not cult, but like something that could have turned into a cult. And I attribute, the work that I've done throughout the years, that, and also some external things that happened where I was like woken and shook, and I was like, what the fudge am I doing? Like this, like I was woken and I was like, this goes against everything that I've ever, or that where I'm like my integrity, my authenticity, my values, my everything. And so, um, so excuse me, now I feel like I have to sneeze. That's so funny. Um, um, One of the things that for me when it comes to cults is that I see something that I've been following is those who have left Scientology, and and how in quote unquote consuming some of that content, I can see how they're using spiritual concepts that I completely agree with.
absolutely. That was one of the ones I got wrapped up in.
Oh, it was? Okay, there you go. But but and and at the same time, the missing piece for me is discernment. Like the moment you have someone saying to you, "Oh, don't believe what you see, feel, hear, sense," like, but you have but trust an outside source. I'm like, yeah, see ya, suckers. I'm not doing that, because we have to discernment, like connection within and discernment. So oh, that's so funny that you mentioned Scientology. So that's one of the things where when it comes to cults, is like it's so enraging to me, is that they're actually taking quote unquote spiritual concepts that make sense and can be really beneficial, except they're flipping it on their head, and then they're using it for power, money, and I don't know, whatever. It's just that just enrages me. So I don't know if there was no question really in there. I just wanted to punch that.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of your journey from binary to non-binary, what has that journey been like? And how did you recognize or realize it? Um,
Yeah, and that's something that's still like working itself out in my
yeah,
life. So, because one of the things that I struggled with when I was evangelical was the whole, okay, we need to advocate for anti-LGBTQ laws, and that being gay was wrong. Because I remember getting in trouble and my mom freaking out when she saw my MySpace page and I was watching the music video for the two Russian
yeah,
singers that
yeah, yeah,
were cool
yeah.
early 2000s
Pussy
when the
Riot,
did you
Pussy
say?
Riot.
And that
Yeah,
was like, no, I was like tattoo. TAT.
Oh, yeah. Oh, those two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that whole controversial thing, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was like my earliest like gay awakening,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm feeling things and I'm attracted to this,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but it wasn't really shameful. I was just like, I'm attracted to this until like
Yeah.
my mom like freaked out because I guess like my uncle saw my MySpace page. This was like in the early days of the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah. Where you could see everything and see everything there.
Yeah,
Like,
and
yeah. Yeah.
he hit like file print and he printed out my entire MySpace page on his actual inkjet printer. So it was just this pages and pages and
Oh,
pages long. And he stapled it together and took it to my mother who is a teacher at the time. It was just like, this is your child's my mom just had this whole like, are you gay? Tell me. And I was like, I don't know. And then it was just like this whole thing. And so then I just kind of just kept that to myself for years and years and years, but it bothered me, especially in my school like Bible group, because when I was at the my first church where I was really active in, our youth pastor was really big on like starting a Bible club in your school so you can get your classmates to go to it.
mhm.
Which in hindsight, I'm like, that's really culty, but okay.
Yeah. 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 It is.
So
Yeah.
we did. So I had like my Bible group, but I was the one out of my group where I was like, we shouldn't even be focusing on this. Like, let people come as they are.
Yeah.
Like, I was really big on like, Jesus loves you as you are. Like, let's not even focus on that. Because I was even on the whole like, it's a mistranslation in the Bible. Like this verse is actually really talking about pedophilia, whatever. Like I was on that wave of like, I'm not gonna get on the anti-gay train. Like that, and that was one of the other reasons why they didn't really like me too much because I was like, because my theological explanation was always, okay, when the new covenant was made with Christ, when he died on the cross, that gave us free will. So
Yeah.
why are we as Christians who are supposed to be about love trying to subvert other people's free will? Because that and
Exactly.
they were just and now as an adult I'm like, oh, I ate with that, like 15, 16-year-old Sim, like I ate.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they were even like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. And also remembering that the Bible is a collection of stories that is collected by people who lived years after Yeshua died on the cross or chose, like whatever, and also does not, puts women in a specific place and people in a specific place. It's like everything is just like what Joshua taught was love is the way.
Right.
It's very simple, and I don't, and that's one of the things that I don't under like if if God is the creator of everything, like God to me is source and love and whatever you want to name on it. If that's the creator of everything, who am I to judge God's create? Like if someone chooses to be, not hold on, that's the wrong statement. If someone is non-binary or lesbian or gay or I don't know whatever else, they're if they are that,
Yeah.
who am I to judge? Who am I to say that that's wrong? How do I get the hubris to say that I'm right, you're wrong? Like that to me is just like what?
Yeah. And there was a situation where there was a one of my classmates came to our group who was openly gay. Who was
Yeah.
openly gay. Because this was around the time in high school where, at least in my area, like being openly gay in school was relatively acceptable for the most
Oh,
part.
great.
Like you,
Yeah,
but yeah, there were people like I remember
great.
yeah, like freshman year I saw like two gay guys like holding hands and they were dating and I was like, "Oh, this is cool. Like I like this."
Yeah.
But he came to because I think this was around the time that he had become a cheerleader and I loved that for him. Like he was
Yeah.
like so cool. And I almost wish I could track him down now and like hug him and just be like,
Yeah.
I like love you so much and I'm so
Yeah.
sorry that happened to you because he
Yeah.
came like asking about it, but they gathered around and just looked up the Bible verses against homosexuality. And even our group sponsor was like, I don't think this is the way. And even I was like, this is not the way. Like this is
Yeah.
not it. And I could feel his whole spirit just break down like in
Yeah.
real time.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most like gut-wrenching horrific things for me to watch. And I
Yeah.
almost felt it in myself because
Yeah.
I knew there was a part of me deep down that
Yeah.
like was him because it's like I was a queer person but it wasn't fully there yet.
Yeah.
And that was when that part really, really shut down.
Yeah.
And then fast forwarding some years later when I was at my last church, the bigger one, and they had this conference and I mean, he would travel, and I think his name was like Cy Rogers, and he he's what we would now call like a detransitioner. So he was a trans woman at the
Oh,
time
okay.
before prior, and then he was preaching that basically like being gay was a choice and you can change. And he detransitioned back to a man and got married. And but he was still very effeminate and was basically preaching like I have scars, like and sometimes scars aren't physical, like they're just like your mannerisms, like basically justifying. And I remember listening to him talk, but I could not hear the truth in what he was speaking, not within himself of
Mm.
just like and it was wild too because yeah, it was the annual women's conference, but
Yeah.
then they had him come speak at the main Sunday service. And that year for that women's conference, they have like this fashion show where they work with like local boutiques and stuff, and I was in it. And
Yeah.
I remember that he actually sat in on the fashion show with his wife, and he looked so happy. He looked so like full of light and just in his element. And I'm actually shocked today that they even let him do that because I feel like in church today they would have been like, nah, you can't. If you do that, then clearly you're
Yeah.
not. Because the way that
Yeah. Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
way the church is acting in the states
Yeah.
right now. But so
Yeah.
that was actually pretty progressive of them to let him do that. But I just remember the inauthenticity in what he was preaching
Yeah.
of like, no, you are a woman.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
are.
Exactly.
Like, and you like for
Yeah.
whatever reason, because it was so many years, it was like well over a decade, like a decade plus, I think like
Yeah.
15, 16 years now since that I had that
Yeah.
experience. I remember feeling something within myself of like, I know that I fall somewhere in the queue in the LGBTQ plus, but
Yeah.
I don't know what that queue really looks like. And I just stayed there for a long
Yeah.
time. And then I remember this was back when Tyra Banks had
Yeah.
her talk show.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so problematic, problematic talk show. But she did an episode on intersex people.
Yeah.
Um, And I remember that everything that I felt when I watched that episode of how I felt like, okay, like I don't want to be on the whole, like it's time to hate the gay people train. I don't want to be on. And there was this particular person on the show. I think their name was Hida because they were on the Tyra show and then they were on the Montel Williams show. Gosh, I feel like I'm aging myself for any like US listeners if you remember Montel Williams talk show, but talking and that was the first conversation around pronouns that I had that I
Mm.
heard.
Mm.
This
Okay.
was years before pronouns became a thing and they were talking about the possibility of introducing Z or in
Yeah.
zir in
Yeah.
um Z, zir, and here, I think,
Yeah.
as a pronoun for intersex people, and how no, intersex people really are born this way. Like this is
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
physiological
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
for them. And it was the first instance where heard in the mainstream of a possibility that this bleeding even into queer people,
Yeah.
um, having conversation around like you can be born
Yeah.
gay or lesbian. Like
Yeah.
this is something that like has nothing to do with sin or however. And that was just really like that. I
Mm.
remember that sparked something in me
Yeah.
too. Then years later, I met Pigeon, who is an intersex activist. And this was in the early days of when Pigeon was on Instagram, and Pigeon now is just has done so much. Like they've written a book, like so proud of Pigeon, but they were talking about being intersex on BuzzFeed
Oh wow. Yeah.
and being a gender non-conforming intersex person and
Yes.
using they them pronouns. And I
Yeah.
said, oh, well, I know that I'm not intersex, but gender non-conforming. And then it turned into looking up gender queer, and I loved how it looked a little bit different for every person that
Yeah.
identified that way, but at the same time it was also the reason why it frustrated and pissed off other people who didn't understand it, because it's
Yeah.
like it means different things to different people, and so it's not
Yeah.
real. But it's like this gets to be expansive,
Yes. Yeah.
because one of the things that just never jived with me in my days of like Christianity was when you're in that world, especially as an adolescent, you're pretty much also being raised up to be a wife in
Yeah.
someone's house. And this idea of like, why is it that because I'm married to a man, that I then have to lower myself and make him
Yeah.
basically like my handler and
Yeah.
run things through
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
when why can't it just be an equal thing where I
Yeah.
support his gifts and
Yeah.
just that whole
Yeah.
like, and then that Proverbs 31 wife thing that would make my stomach turn, and I
Yeah.
felt really guilty and I felt a
Yeah.
lot of shame for it, like the whole concept of a Proverbs 31 wife. I was like, but no, like,
And again, going back to how the Bible was assembled, right?
oh.
Again, like when you know that, that makes sense. One of the, one of the things, and also because what you're speaking to is, because I understand that we live in the world of duality and polarity. And as such, there are, hot and cold, wet and dry. And I understand on a spiritual level that we as souls come here to experience, quote unquote, that polarity. What I've
Yeah,
also seen, or in my expansion over the years, or unveiling, as I like to call it, is how queer people or non-binary people, um, by their very existence, help us expand our awareness and our, I don't want to say compassion, but like our ability to connect with oneness. Not that they have to, like you don't have to. There's no, queer people, non-binary people, gay people. No, there's no obligation to share or to educate. There's simply like the by existing, I see you help us transcend and, elevate without it getting to the point where there's no low frequencies and all that. We know
that
that.
part. Yeah.
Does that make like because so spiritual, and also when you look back through history, queer people, non-binary people, not gender non-conforming people, I was going to say we, like, you've always existed. They've always existed. It's never like there's never been a time without. Um, and I don't know. I don't know. It's like is Christianity and Catholicism simply just to blame for all of that? Like, is that because I too, like, I have the Macklin voices, and I on a spiritual level, I mean, I completely understand the concept of feminine and masculine. Um, what I have added on as my journey has expanded is, feminine, and also when you talk about feminine and masculine, or in that concept, you talk about the hieros gammas, like the unification of those polarities into oneness. And so that oneness is where I see gender non-conforming, non-binary, queer people fitting in, or not fitting in, being, I suppose, in. And so
Yeah,
there's a, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, just like the embodiment of that. And that's where I've landed now in
Yeah.
my understanding, because even recently, when I look back at who my idols and biggest influences were, especially musically and artistically, were David Bowie,
Mm,
were Grace Jones, were
mm,
were people who were very gender fluid, and
Yeah.
even like reading Robert Greene's work, I know he's very controversial and polarizing, but reading The Art of Seduction and seeing that like my seducer type is the dandy, is
Yeah.
the what he describes as the this androgynous being who attracts through confusion, but also through that free flowing
Yeah. Yeah.
essence and being, and
Yeah.
how like of just, and it's like, yeah, like
Energy.
it, I totally identify with that. Or even just like some of my favorite rock stars growing up were just very like
Yeah.
androgynous, or it's like I can't even tell,
And I
it's
suppose, is androgynous, is that what we would call gender fluid today, or
not always, not
yeah,
always.
not always. Okay.
There's a big saying that, non-binary people don't owe you androgyny, because a lot of people will
Okay.
negate a person who identifies as gender fluid, gender
Gotcha.
nonconforming, or binary because
Yeah.
they don't present.
Yeah.
And that has been my experience too, where
Yeah.
people are like, you look like a woman, you still wear makeup, you
Yeah.
still, I guess, quote unquote, act like a woman, so you must not
Yeah.
be, you're not,
Yeah.
androgynous enough for however. And it's like, because
Yeah.
I'm what I you get what I give you
Yeah.
a certain day. And so
And do so the lens you view the world, because I one of the questions I have is, I suppose, I can see where I was at 8 years ago when I started the Macklin Voices, and it was like, I was in the feminine and masculine. I was using feminine and masculine terminology, which I still do, and I also include essentially oneness. And so it's no longer a polarity, but it's, I don't know if it's a triangularity or what it's called, but there's an expansion of it. And the way that I view it, I can see that I probably couldn't have arrived at where I'm at today in terms of transcendence and seeing the oneness and understanding that, if I hadn't gone through the work with the polarity. Does that make and duality? Does that make sense?
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, because I ended up working with a few like mentors and coaches that were very much into that, but then when they would say things about me being too much in my masculine or
Yeah,
not in my feminine, there was something in my spirit, and I was perceptive, understanding, and coherent enough in my own soul channel
yeah,
to know that I was like, this is something that is their stuff, and
yeah. Taught
and
stuff.
then the way they would teach it or just would talk about it, that has nothing to do with me, but because
Yeah,
of how I present and how I exist, they're putting it in this lens of
yeah.
masculine, not good for you and how you look, and because of how you present, it needs to look like this, and then you will be um
And how would
will be
you,
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
how would you, because so if we look at, it's funny because I remember years ago when I was first introduced to energy work, one of my first questions to the teacher back then was how, there we were taught about yin and yang, like those two opposing energies, which I suppose has been translated into feminine and masculine energies. Um, and also, if you look at the yin and the yang symbol, there is the wholeness as well, and there's also the merging of the two energies. Um, do you recognize that there are two energies or more energies, or how do you see that?
I do. So I recognize it in a, this is where I'm at with this. And
Yeah,
honestly, it'll probably change like how, I don't know. This
yeah,
is a
yeah.
very,
Because we're allowed to change.
yeah, we're not a
That's one of the
change.
things
But
about.
as
Go ahead.
as it stands right now and as I feel about it now, there are energies that present in a different way.
Yeah,
In a way that's a little more like forward, angular, logical,
yeah.
just in. another energy that is a little more fluid,
Yeah.
uh, and flowing and curvier and how that
Yeah.
we think of as feminine. And I'm okay with using it for people needing a frame of reference.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm okay with it being referred to as masculine and feminine. I mean, it's the whole reason why we have like high femme or like mask lesbians or however, even within the
Yeah.
queer community. It's just my issue with a lot of the polarity people, especially a lot of these like feminine energy coaches, is the way that they teach it
Yes.
isn't really in that way. Like it pulls from that, but it's more or less like you can tell that they're still looking at it as gender roles.
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
have
Yes.
that energy doesn't have a gender. Energy
No.
has a different feel and can have a different
Yes.
flavor and a different
Yes.
variety, but
Yeah.
it of itself has no gender. It's
Yes.
not.
Yes. And just
So,
as gender is not biological, like
correct.
we have taken biological aspects and assigned gender to them and what and even I think even biology today recognizes that that's completely wrong, but it's just like
Right.
the science is way ahead of what we're being taught today. So,
Right. Which
yeah.
is why I laugh when people say there can't be all these different genders and it's not science, but it's like, look at science currently.
Yes. Look
So
at the
yeah, that's where
actual
I,
science.
yeah, because then I find that a lot of those teachers who also look at that frame of reference are also very transphobic too, and have very,
Yeah.
not all, but a
Yeah.
lot of do hold
Yeah.
very transphobic
Yeah. Yeah, that
views.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
again, I- that and that's something that I don't think I've ever understood is, even before I was where I'm at now, was the whole like making someone wrong for based on your beliefs or your whatever, like that don't make no sense to me. Like it's never made
right.
it's like that's never made any sense to me. I just realized that we like we're just yeah we're going. One of the sorry one of the I know that you don't I know that we have time, so I'll keep going. One of the questions I would like to ask you has to do with mastery. How do you view mastery, and what is mastery to you?
Mm. How do I view mastery and what is mastery to me? Wow, that's a really good question. And that is so much of the work that I do in the world. And I think it's important with mastery because I know even with myself previously, when we think of mastery, we think of like an arrival, like
Ooh.
of like a point
Hmm.
of end, like an end point,
Hello.
like a like the top level of like the penthouse
Yes.
of whatever it is we desire, where you can't go farther, but
Mm,
it's a ever going journey. I think of mastery less as a linear like elevator and more of
mm,
like the Nautilus shell,
yes.
that golden mean, that Fibonacci spiral where every
Yes.
turn it's more
Yes.
expansive and
Yes.
wider and wider. And
Yes.
so like
Yes.
for example, like a lot of with my work is um I follow a lot of my teacher, my one of my energy teachers, Melissa Sandin's energetic journey model. And a lot of what that is um it's you have your three-phase process, but first you embody, then you energize, then you expand, and then there's this higher portion
Yes.
that just works itself out and just moves through.
Yes.
And at that point, you're still taking little bits of where you are that
Yeah.
maybe you need to embody more of, maybe you need to
Yes.
expand, and then
Yes.
maybe
Yes.
you need to
Yes.
energize more. So it's still a fluidity about that. And that's so
Yes.
much of what has super like mega resonated with me
Yes.
um with that and much of what I live by. And so the biggest part of my work in that journey and within that frame of reference is getting to this point where the shadow aspect is to contract and your nervous system will then collapse. and
Mm.
saying that, okay, I need to, okay, now is the time of not I need to, but how do I need to expand to be able to hold this level of being, to be
Mm.
able to this level of embodiment and this energy that I'm bringing in
Yes.
so that
Yes.
I can mm, so that I can widen, right? You
Yes.
know, that part of the
Yes.
Fibonacci where it's really like opening up in that shell.
Yes.
And so that's really been the biggest like medicine of mastery for me is
Yeah.
that can I sit in this discomfort
Yes.
and feel it when I get to the feeling part of what it is of the resistance that I'm feeling to move into my bigger expansion. Can I
Yes.
sit and
Yes.
stay
Yes. Yes.
um to really break through
Yes.
of like, okay, this emotion, this is feeling really uncomfortable and
Yeah.
ghetto and weird, but I just want to
Yeah.
break through. And so that really has been the biggest part of mastery for me,
Yes.
especially who's also neurodivergent and also manifesting generator in human design, where I just want to
Yes.
do all the things all the time. And
Yes.
it's also steps and just
Yeah.
realizing like, okay, like this part that has a lot of energy, like I gotta sit here.
Yeah.
We can't skip this step. Like this
No.
step can't be skipped. We have to really like get in here. And so that's where I really get into, okay, let me feel this in my body. What
Being.
is it? What does it have to say? What is the message?
Yeah.
Feel it. All right, give it a voice. All
Yeah.
right. And now we're just gonna lean
Yeah.
into it.
That is, I mean, and that is so beautiful because it's, I love when you share it's not on a rival place, um, because it gives us permission to, for me, I think the biggest part about mastery has been the both and. It's not either or, it's the both and. Like I can be the master and the student. I can be happy beyond anything and also grieving. I can be elated and I can be sad. And that to me is like the transcendence beyond the world of duality and polarity, because nobody gets to tell me that I can only be either or, that I can. So for me it's the both and of it. And I love how you shared like that it continues, because I mean, yes, I suppose in my early days I thought, okay, I just got to get to this point and done. And to me I call it the unveiling, because it's lifting continual veils, right? And I also look to nature to see how there's this constant expand, like death and rebirth and expansion that happens, and we just seems to forgot that we're part of that, nature, that we can expand. And you shared, I think in the beginning when we started talking, you talked about, and you've mentioned a few times, the supposed the version or the edition or the rendition that we're getting right now. It doesn't have to be the same. Like change is the only constant. We're constantly evolving. So something that I believe in. I think it was one of my clients that I was, blessed to have a sacred conversation with. Her name is Agabera, and she was sharing how like what she shared about 3 years or 5 years ago is not what she's sharing today. And we were allowed to change. You're allowed to change.
Absolutely. Like when we met initially, like the iteration of my work was so different
Yes,
what it
yes,
is now.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
so different and
yes.
is changed so much, but that's ultimately what we're getting back to. I feel like
But
as a world is just back
and
to
also the truth in you, I think, is stable. Like one of the things that I've seen in you over the past, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, I don't remember how long we've been connected. For me, is like, again, I call it the oracle nature, and I don't want to put titles on you, but like the truthfulness. Well, sorry.
so I received that title, Oracle
Okay,
Fiance.
great. Because that's like, because oracles of are people who often are quote unquote shunned for the truth that they share, and then people later find out like, oh, what they share were actually true. So it's like, there's a for me there is a you have a a frequency of speaking truth,
Mhm.
even when it's not wanted, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's yeah. So the truthfulness is what I've seen through all of the renditions or the editions that I've seen, and I celebrate you. Like again, I like I said, I double tap and love and cheer and whatever because yeah, the truthfulness. I mean, we could continue going on. I'm just checking in to see, is there anything else that you would like to share before we go? I mean, of course, I'll be sharing the links and the things and the one of the things that keep coming up for me, I don't know if you shared this, but you also you work with sound and like there's I can hear the tunes like it's making my spine go straight. So I just want to mention that you're also working with sound in profound ways.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I will share all the links and the things so that people in the description so people can go find you. Is there anything else you would like to share before we close this sacred conversation for now?
Yeah, I just thought that this was really good and just like a really great way to talk about just embodiment and gender and just how you can we talk a lot about how you can do, with your gifts, but just how you can be like in your gifts. Like there's the doing and then
Mhm.
there's also the being, but your being is also a doing. And so
Yes.
like just I know like there's a whole phrase of like making things your whole personality. You're like with
Mhm.
things that you really like. And so it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, for me, I don't make like my gender identity my personality in any way, but it definitely in has allowed me, like you said, to just be, and that being activates so much for other people of this is what it
Yes.
can look like
Yes.
to be in my highest alignment, to live in my
Yes.
authenticity, to see a part of their soul blueprint and their
Yeah.
energetic code like in a different way. So
Yes.
yeah, it's just all about expansiveness, and I love that, and that's so much of what I do just with
Yeah.
sound and
Yeah.
and
Yeah, you again, you have you see beyond I suppose appearances, right? You see straight through. And in that, I mean, I had when was it? A couple of weeks ago, I was doing a good energy flow shop. It was my first time doing it really in person. And the night before, I had this like I realized all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is part of the journey because I was in a massive meltdown. I was like, it's gonna be horrible and like it's nobody's gonna I was just having this massive meltdown and and in an instant I had this moment of like stepping outside of myself and realizing, oh, this is part of expansion. I am standing in front of a group of people that I don't know. Yes, I have my sister with me as my plushy bear, like that's my toy to like to hold. But I'm gonna be talking, and as I moved closer and closer to the time on the next day when it was, I got calmer and calmer and like it flowed. It was so easy. And in terms of what you shared, moving into the embodiment and the being, one thing I want to highlight is that that's often the most quote unquote easiest and the most easiest thing to disregard because it's so easy for you. Like I know that you work with human design and you help people in that way. And having not doing it for others, but having know my design and all that, I recognize that the more aligned I am and the easier things is, but there's also that logic part that's like, isn't this supposed to be hard? Does that make sense? Like with the being part that you mentioned?
yeah, but is it
Yeah.
supposed to be hard because a lot of us because we're all post-industrial revolution
Yes.
being,
Yes.
and so the idea, especially people who live in the States where it's very much like live to work versus work to live. I
Yes.
mean, versus it's work, yeah, it's like live to work versus work to live in a lot of places, but you
Yeah.
know, anywhere where it's very puritanical, it's definitely going to be like a live to work
Yeah.
mentality. So especially like here the States particularly, it's very much like if you're not working hard and if you're not busy all the time, like there's something wrong with you. So it has that ingrained with all growth needs to be hard. And if it's easy to achieve, then it's not worth feeling accomplished over
No, yeah,
because it
yeah,
was too simple. And
yeah,
and that's something that I really had to overcome of, and it took a lot of work to let a lot of how I
yeah,
do and be in the world, like
yeah,
just
yeah,
be,
yeah,
because for a while it was just, well, I can't because the people are gonna be mad and people are
yeah,
gonna be mean to me, or I might
yeah,
have,
yeah,
harm come. And but you just, through just leaning in and that surrender of the feel of the feeling into it,
yeah,
identifying what it is, and then
yeah,
just like doing
collapsing.
scared,
Yeah,
doing it even in the discomfort, that
yeah,
gets that trust
yeah,
muscle going to where you can just, all right, like
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just gonna post the post and post the
yeah,
thing to the people, and feel about it how you want to feel about
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And because the more you are in your truth, the easier it is for people to hear you, is what I found.
Yeah, absolutely.
Simran, this has been such a joy. Thank you for gifting us your time and your wisdom and your insight and your brilliance. Again, to everyone listening and or watching, I will share Simran's info details in the description, and please do check them out. They are, as I've said a million times, brilliant. Sending lots of love to everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you so much.
That is what I have for you in today's episode of Mastery with Maria Serafina. I hope it served you well. For all the deeds and details, click the link in the description and help me spread the love of this transmission by sharing it with a friend or on social media, or leave me a comment or review. Have a wonderful day. God bless.